The rain battered the glass panes of the mariner's table, blurring the city lights into molten streaks. Inside, the restaurant glowed with brass and velvet, polished forks catching glimmers of the chandelier's gold light. The air was thick with the scent of roasted lamb, aged bourbon, and wealth too old to be loud. Mira Delane moved like a shadow through it. Her uniform was black and plain, the kind meant to erase a body from view. She carried empty glasses on a tray balanced by memory, replaced them with fresh stemware, and smiled just enough to be forgotten. Guests glanced at her only when they needed something. That was the plan. To them, Mira was ordinary. To herself, she was not. Every twitch of a hand, every angle of a jaw, every hesitation of breath, she registered all of it. The couple by the window had not spoken in 20 minutes. The man at the bar stirred his ice the way liars stir confessions. The widow at table 6 adjusted her pearls every time money was mentioned. Mira did not serve these people. She studied them. The locket beneath her collar pressed against her chest, cool and persistent. Silver, worn smooth from years of nervous touch. She had promised herself long ago never to forget why she kept it. A promise built on a grave. At 8:15, the oak door swung open. Elias Ward entered. The room shifted as if air itself had taken notice. Conversations staggered. Heads turned. Ward walked without bodyguards, without ceremony, but his presence commanded. His suit was tailored dark wool, his tie ink blue, his posture deliberate. He was not merely wealthy, he was inevitability dressed in silk. Ward came always alone, always on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, and always to the same alcove booth. Not for food, not for company, for memory. Mira knew this not because anyone had told her, but because she had seen him look once, just once, at the seat across from him. The empty seat his late wife used to fill. She approached with her notepad, though she could have recited his order in her sleep. "Good evening, sir," she said softly. His voice was low, accustomed to being obeyed. "A pour of Glenavon, neat." Mira nodded, but as she turned to go, he looked up, his eyes, pale and unflinching, fixed on her. "Is the venison as steady as last time?" His words were casual, but they carried the weight of inspection. He was testing not the food, but the world, if standards were holding. "Chef Rowan hasn't slipped," Mira answered evenly. "You'll find it better." For the first time in her years of serving him, she saw his mouth almost form a smile. Almost. She walked toward the bar, though her senses prickled. Something in the room had shifted. Not him. The air. The hush beneath the conversations. She dismissed it as the storm outside leaking inward. She was wrong. At 8:43, the door opened again. This time the sound was sharp, metallic. Wrong. 5 men entered. They did not arrive together, but their steps were aligned. One stationed himself with a view of the entrance. Another slipped toward the corridor leading to restrooms. 2 broad-shouldered figures moved to the bar and kitchen doors, closing exits without a word. The 5th man, lean and precise, cut through the room with a predator's calm. Their silence was heavier than noise. The maitre d' opened his mouth, but the first man stilled him with the smallest shake of his head. The message was absolute. This was no request. Mira polished a wine glass, her expression blank, her body still invisible. Inside, her pulse quickened. Their spacing, their confidence. It was unmistakable. Not thieves, not vandals, professionals. They weren't after money. They were after Ward. Elias Ward had already noticed. He lifted his glass, watching their reflections in the amber liquid. His face showed only mild annoyance, as if a meeting had been poorly timed. The leader's smile was thin. He moved closer to Ward's booth. Phones appeared on tables, trembling hands placing them like offerings. A choked sob rose from a woman in the corner. Conversations died completely. Mira's gaze darted across the room, Entrances blocked, staff cornered, diners paralyzed. The locket on her chest was ice. Her mind calculated with ruthless speed. 2 heavies, 2 scouts, 1 commander. Target, Ward. Objective, extraction. The man by the kitchen caught her watching. His eyes skimmed over her, dismissing her instantly. A waitress. Harmless. Furniture. It was the same mistake everyone made, the same mistake she depended on. She placed the glass down with a deliberate click. The sound was small, but in the suffocating hush it cracked like thunder. The nearest enforcer turned his head toward her. His frown was mild irritation, nothing more. That was when Mira Delane stopped being invisible. The slump of her shoulders straightened, her body aligning into a coil of steel. The softness in her face vanished, replaced by cold, steady focus. The storm was no longer outside. It was here, and she was its center. The man nearest the bar never finished his turn. Mira was already moving. Her body did not ask for permission. Years of training buried beneath quiet years of servitude surged upward with ruthless clarity. She vaulted the counter without elegance, but with speed that bent disbelief. In her hand, she had taken the nearest object, a full bottle of Bordeaux, heavy and dark. The man's eyes widened. He fumbled for his weapon, but her swing arrived first. The glass did not shatter. The man's skull absorbed it with a sickening thud. His legs buckled, his body folded, and he crashed to the carpet with the boneless slack of a marionette cut free. The restaurant gasped as one. The leader froze mid-step, his thin smile cracking into something colder. Elias Ward did not flinch. He simply placed his glass down, a faint ring of whiskey trembling against crystal. The second enforcer near the kitchen raised his gun. Mira kicked a bar stool into his path, a blur of wood scraping across the floor. He instinctively sidestepped. In that half-second, Mira had already lunged low, sprinting not at him, but at the doors. The first shot thundered through the restaurant. A woman screamed. The bullet ripped splinters from the doorframe an inch from Mira's head. She slammed into the kitchen, the double doors crashing shut behind her. Inside, the staff huddled in terrified silence. Pots simmered on burners. Knives gleamed abandoned on cutting boards. Steam hissed from copper pans. Out the back. Now! Her voice was no longer the murmured politeness of service. It was a command edged in steel. The chef fumbled at the bolt, the dishwasher sobbing as he pushed. The heavy door creaked open into rain and alley shadows. They scattered. The second enforcer crashed through the swinging doors, pistol raised. His grin was jagged, cruel. You're dead. Mira had already armed herself. A skillet still hot from searing lay waiting. She hurled it with precision. The iron disc spun, smacking his wrist and shoulder. His gun hand faltered, pain flashing through his face. She didn't wait. She drove her body into his chest, low and hard. His breath tore from him in a grunt. She seized his wrist, twisting not to disarm, but to redirect. The gun pointed ceilingward as she slammed 3 sharp strikes into his throat. His gag was a choking animal sound. The pistol clattered to tile. One final shove sent him staggering into a prep table corner. His skull cracked against steel. He collapsed, silent. 2 down. Mira's chest heaved. Her hand clutched the locket burning cold against her sternum. The old rhythm whispered back to her, the one her trainer had carved into her bones. Hesitate, and you die. Her fingers closed around the fallen gun. Glock. Full magazine. The feel was too familiar. Muscle memory returned, unwelcome but absolute. Beyond the kitchen, voices barked. Orders. Panic. She heard the shuffle of uncertain feet. Scouts, not soldiers. The leader's voice slithered through the air. Subdue her. Use whatever force you want. Mira crouched beside the door, listening. Steps. Breath. She grabbed a pot of boiling water. Steam scalded her hand even through the towel, but she held it steady. She kicked the door open, unleashing the water in a wide arc. A scream tore the air as the first scout crumpled, clawing at his face. His gun hit carpet. The second staggered back, blinded by steam and fear. Mira exploded through the doorway, driving the pistol's heavy butt into his chin. His body folded. His world went dark. 4 down. Only the leader remained. He stood 20 feet away, his suit immaculate, his gun trained not on her, but on Elias Ward. The barrel aimed at the tycoon's temple. The room trembled under the weight of the standoff. "Drop it," the leader said, voice steady as stone, "or I paint his brains across the tablecloth." Mira leveled her own weapon, stance perfect, breath measured. Her eyes were ice. "You walk out. You live." The man laughed, sharp and cruel. "You think you're a savior? You're a waitress. I'm Dante Vale. I have ended governments for less than this. You brought your war into my house." Her voice was low, deadly. "Last warning." For the first time, his eyes flickered. He saw her, not the servant, but the predator beneath. His certainty wavered, the tiniest fracture in armor. Ward, calm as stone, lifted his gaze between them. His eyes held the weight of recognition. He saw her too. The leader sneered, fired not at Ward but at the floor. The blast shattered oak, spraying splinters. Diners screamed. He dove behind a table, taking cover. Now it was cat and mouse. Mira crouched low, weaving through toppled booths, her movement soundless. Rain slashed through the broken window. "Who trained you?" Vale's voice probed, echoing. "Not police, not army. Something darker. What are you?" She did not answer. Silence was her shield. She reached the maitre d's station. A heavy bronze swan perched there, ornamental and absurd. She ripped off her black jacket, draped it over the statue, and held it against the window's glass. Vale's eyes caught the reflection. He fired. The window shattered, shards raining. Wind howled in. Mira was already sprinting from the side. She hit him full force. Guns flew, their bodies slammed to the floor. The fight was savage, close, breath against breath. Vale was strong, trained, precise, but she was merciless. Elbow into his ribs, palm to his nose. The crunch split his face with blood. He swung wildly. She trapped his arm, bent it against its design. His scream pierced the air. The restaurant held its breath. Patrons cowered, yet their eyes fixed on her, this phantom who had risen from nothing. "Where is it?" Vale coughed, choking on blood. "The drive." Mira pressed harder, her fury sharpened to a single point. She thought of the locket, of the grave it represented, of the vow she'd made. With a final brutal twist, his arm broke. He crumpled beneath her, the predator undone. Silence. Rain whispered through shattered glass. Diners stared at her as if she were something more than human. Elias Ward rose from his booth, pale but unbroken. His eyes held a question she was not ready to answer. This was not over. The storm had only begun. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but closing fast. Their pitch rose and fell like the breath of some colossal beast drawing near. Inside the mariner's table, the silence had a different weight now. Not the hush of wealth, not the pause of anticipation, but the stunned vacuum that follows violence. Mira stood in the center of the ruined dining room, the Glock loose in her grip, its weight unbearable yet necessary. Her knuckles were scraped raw, her lips split, her chest heaving with breaths that refused to steady. The bronze swan lay toppled on the floor, absurd in its fallen dignity, while blood from Dante Vale's broken face darkened the expensive carpet. Every pair of eyes in the restaurant was on her, some wide with terror, some with awe, all searching for a name to call her. Elias Ward remained at his booth. He had not moved quickly, not once, through the entire encounter. He now rose with a kind of deliberate calm, brushing plaster dust from his suit. His expression was unreadable. His pale eyes locked on Mira, not as one looks at staff, nor even at a rescuer. He looked at her as if she were an equation to be solved. Vale groaned at her feet, clutching his arm. His arrogance was gone, his breath ragged and wet. Yet even broken, he tried to wound her with words. "You don't know what you've done," he rasped. "The drive. It was never yours to guard. Ward stole it. He gutted my employer. A good man. A better man than this thief you just saved." Mira's stomach turned cold. She didn't look at him. She couldn't, but the words sank like stones in deep water. Ward's jaw tightened. "My decisions kept markets intact. Thorne's scheme would have burned the world for his vision. I prevented disaster." Mira's eyes flicked between them, one man bleeding at her feet, the other standing immaculate in tailored silk. Both claimed truth. Both cast the other as villain. The locket against her skin grew heavier with every breath, as though her brother's memory demanded an answer she could not give. The sirens screamed closer. Mira's mind spun faster. Police would storm in any second. They would see her, gun in hand, men down, bodies bruised. They would write the story for her. Invisible waitress turned killer. She would vanish into their system before she could speak a word. Ward saw the fear in her eyes. He stepped closer, his voice dropping low, intimate. "Miss Delane, Mira, whatever you think of me, know this. You didn't save me. You saved them." His hand gestured toward the patrons still cowering by the walls, clutching one another like survivors of a shipwreck. His words pierced her defenses. She looked at the couple who had shielded each other with trembling arms, at the maitre d' whispering reassurance to his staff, at the elderly woman sobbing softly into her pearls. They were alive because she had refused to stay invisible. Still, Vale's whisper gnawed. "Thorne gave children hope. He gave you your strength, and this man crushed him. You serve your brother's destroyer." Her throat tightened. Her grip on the Glock weakened. She could not breathe beneath the weight of contradiction. Ward, watching her falter, made his play. From the inner pocket of his jacket, he drew something so small it could vanish in a fist. A gold, feather-shaped drive, no larger than a coin. He pressed it into her hand. Her skin went cold. "The Phoenix drive," Ward murmured. "If you believe I cannot be trusted, then you keep it. Hold it. Decide who deserves it." The object burned with significance, with betrayal, with power. It was trust, or manipulation, or both. Mira's hand closed around it instinctively, her pulse pounding against the metal. She looked at him, saw no fear, no hesitation, only calculation and respect. The sirens were outside now, red and blue lights flashing across shattered glass. The first shout came, "NYPD, drop your weapon," as boots thundered toward the door. Mira set the Glock carefully on the nearest table. Slowly, she lifted her hands. One was open, the other clenched tight around the feather drive, hidden from sight. Officers swarmed, weapons raised, shouting commands that blurred into noise. Diners cried out, relief and fear mingling. The injured men groaned under rough hands, shackled and hauled upright. Through it all, Mira kept her gaze locked on Elias Ward. He spoke quickly to the detectives, his voice cool and commanding, weaving a story of a robbery thwarted, a waitress who defended herself and others with impossible courage. He was painting her as a heroine while burying the truth under layers of narrative and authority. The Glock vanished into an evidence bag. Statements were taken. Names recorded. Mira answered nothing. Silence was safer than words. But as the officers moved Vale toward the door, broken and defeated, his eyes caught hers. "Tell him," he hissed through bloodied teeth. "Tell Thorne his ghost has returned." The words lodged in her chest like a blade. Ghost. He knew who she was. He knew what Thorne had been to her. The officers dragged him away. Mira's hands trembled, but not from fear, from knowledge. Whatever choice she made now would bind her to one man's war or the other's, and whichever path she chose, her brother's memory would be there, demanding she justify it. Ward stepped closer as the room emptied, lowering his voice to where only she could hear. "You are not invisible anymore. Remember that." The words sank deeper than any bullet. Outside, the city roared with sirens and rain. Inside, Mira stood frozen in the wreckage, the feather drive hidden in her fist, her future suspended in the balance. The mariner's table no longer smelled of lamb or bourbon. It reeked of gunpowder, blood, and fear left behind in its velvet corners. By morning, the newspapers would call it a robbery gone wrong, but Mira knew that truth had nothing to do with it. Truth was broken glass on the floor. Truth was the gold feather hidden in her palm. Detectives questioned her for hours in a back corner of the dining room, their notebooks filled with neat lines of doubt. Mira's answers were clipped, polite, designed to be forgettable. She had spent her life making herself invisible. Tonight, it was a skill she needed more than ever. But invisibility had already slipped. The patrons stared at her as they filed past the police tape. Some whispered gratitude. Some crossed themselves. All looked twice, memorizing her face. She had become a story whether she wanted it or not. Elias Ward lingered near the windows, silent, untouched by the officer's suspicion. He had draped himself in authority the way others wore coats. When detectives asked, he spoke as if reading from a script written before the night began. 5 men stormed in, intent on theft, and a waitress with remarkable nerve protected innocent lives. A tragic accident. Nothing more. His words created a wall around her. She did not thank him. Gratitude was another chain. Near midnight, Mira was released. The streets still wept rain, police lights staining puddles red and blue. She stepped into the night air, sharp with exhaust and wet asphalt, her hands trembling from the aftershock of survival. The locket pressed against her chest. The drive pressed harder in her pocket. Ward appeared at her side. His umbrella arched above her without asking. He matched her stride as though it had always been inevitable. "You need protection," he said quietly. "I need distance." He smiled faintly. "Distance doesn't exist anymore. Not for you. The men who came tonight, they were Vale's, yes, but they belonged to Robert Thorne." Her chest tightened at the name. Ward studied her face with the precision of a surgeon. "You know him?" The lie formed on her tongue, but she couldn't release it. Instead, she turned away, focusing on the rain-slick street. Taxis hissed past. Somewhere, a siren wailed again. "Thorne will come back for the drive," Ward continued. "And now he knows you. That makes you valuable. That makes you dangerous." She stopped walking. "To him? Or to you?" Ward's eyes narrowed with something between admiration and warning. "Both." The silence stretched. Rain ticked against the umbrella. Mira's hand closed around the locket as if it could anchor her. She remembered a younger self standing in a community gym, fists raw, fury channeled by a grizzled trainer hired by Thorne. She remembered Thorne's calm voice telling her that discipline turned rage into power. That he believed she could become more than her grief. And now she was holding a weapon that marked him as enemy. Ward broke the silence. "Come to my office tomorrow. There are decisions to make. If you vanish now, you won't survive the week. If you stand with me, you'll have power enough to choose your own future." It was not an invitation. It was a verdict. Mira said nothing. She stepped from beneath his umbrella into the rain and walked away. The city swallowed her, neon bleeding across slick pavement, strangers brushing past without seeing. She had always lived in the shadows of others, surviving by silence. But tonight silence had been broken. Her hands still remembered the weight of the pistol, the sound of bones snapping, the moment she became something no one could ignore. At her apartment, she stripped off her soaked uniform, staring at the bruises blooming across her ribs in the bathroom mirror. Her face was tired, her eyes unfamiliar. She looked down at the locket resting against her skin, then at the feather drive on the counter beside it. Two anchors from two different lives, one born of kindness, the other of power. She wanted to throw the drive into the sink, watch water swallow it. She wanted to keep it hidden forever. She wanted answers from the man who had given her both purpose and silence. Sleep didn't come. Rain beat the windows until dawn. By morning, her story was everywhere. Headlines spun her into a myth. Waitress thwarts armed attack, saves billionaire. News anchors praised her bravery while analysts speculated about her past. Strangers argued her name in comment threads. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the flickering screen, sipping coffee gone cold. The world had turned her into a symbol overnight. But symbols had no choice. Her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it. Curiosity won. A man's voice, low and steady. "Mira Delane?" Her spine stiffened. "Robert Thorne would like to see you." The line clicked dead. She stared at the phone until the screen went black. Her pulse hammered so loud she thought the neighbors must hear. Two men. Two truths. And in her pocket, the weapon both wanted. The city outside was waking, horns blaring, wheels splashing through puddles. Mira closed her hand around the drive. The choice was no longer whether to step forward. It was where. The city moved like it always did, taxis honking, steam rising from vents, crowds pressing shoulder to shoulder, but Mira felt every sound sharpened, every color too bright. Sleep had not found her, only memory and the echo of a voice on the phone. "Robert Thorne would like to see you." She walked the length of a quiet street in Midtown, rain still clinging to the pavement, until she found the building. Not glass and steel like Ward's tower, but brick and iron, restored rather than replaced. Discretion dressed as tradition. No guards at the door, but two men in plain coats waited on the sidewalk, eyes fixed straight ahead, still as statues. One stepped forward as she approached. "Ms. Delane?" She nodded. "Inside." The lobby was narrow, lined with photographs of community centers and playgrounds. Children smiling, gloves on their hands, sweat on their brows. She remembered one of those gyms, remembered bruises that taught her discipline, remembered a man who had believed in her before she believed in herself. She was led to a study on the second floor. Dark wood, books in neat rows, the faint scent of tobacco. Behind a desk sat Robert Thorne. He was older now, hair silver at the temples, but the eyes were the same. Clear, steady. The eyes that had once seen her rage and called it strength. "Mira." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You've grown into the woman I hoped you would." Her throat tightened. Part of her wanted to sit, to let the years collapse and trust him again. Another part screamed that he had sent killers into a restaurant to drag Elias Ward into the night. "You tried to have him taken," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. He studied her, unshaken. "Ward stole what was mine. What could have changed everything? He gutted my work, buried my vision, and sold the scraps to his empire. You saw him for what he is, didn't you?" Mira hesitated. She remembered the way Ward had handed her the drive, trusting her with something he trusted no one else. She remembered Vale's broken sneer, Thorn is the better man. She remembered her brother's locket, the promise she had made to never bow to anyone again. I saw two men willing to let others bleed for their cause, she said. A shadow of disappointment crossed Thorn's face. Then he smiled, slow and sad. You're sharper than you were. Good. I won't waste your time with half-truths. The drive you hold, yes, I know you have it, contains the prototype of an algorithm designed to dismantle the financial chokehold men like Ward control. I built it. He stole it. He calls it dangerous. I call it justice. Her fingers itched toward her pocket where the drive burned cold. She wanted to throw it on his desk, demand the truth in its rawest form. She wanted to crush it under her heel and end their war, but she did neither. You trained me to fight, she said quietly. You said discipline was the only way to keep from drowning in grief. And now you ask me to join a war you began years ago. I ask you to finish what we started, Thorn said. His eyes were kind, but there was iron beneath. You're no longer a girl. You are the blade sharpened by your brother's death, by Kalen's lessons, by every invisible year you endured. You stood in that restaurant and showed the world who you are. You can't crawl back into shadows now. Mira's chest tightened. The storm outside pressed against the window. I'm not your weapon. You're not his either, Thorn replied. Ward will offer you power. He already has. But his empire rests on sand. My cause rests on people. On every child who walked into a gym you once bled in. On every forgotten name who deserves a voice. Choose carefully, Mira. The world doesn't give us many chances to stand where history bends. The words landed heavy. For a moment she saw the gym again. The smell of sweat and chalk, the sound of gloves against leather, her brother's face in the crowd. Thorn had been there when no one else was. He had built something that kept her alive. But Ward had not flinched when 5 men surrounded him. He had placed the Phoenix Drive in her hand, a gesture of respect or manipulation. She still couldn't tell. She rose from the chair, her heart a storm inside her ribs. I'll decide who I am. Not you. Not him. For the first time, Thorn's calm faltered. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowing. You don't have long. Ward will not wait. And neither will I. The silence stretched like a blade between them. Mira turned toward the door. One of the plain-coated men stepped forward to escort her, but Thorn's hand lifted. Let her go. Outside, the street was brighter now, rain-washed, the city roaring with its endless hunger. Mira walked fast, her breath sharp. The Phoenix Drive pulsed against her thigh, heavier than ever. Behind her, in that study lined with children's smiles, Robert Thorn sat alone. His eyes fixed not on the past, but on the war he knew was coming. And Mira Delane, caught between savior and destroyer, felt the line she had drawn for herself beginning to blur. Elias Ward's office sat above the city like a glass citadel. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto the skyline, towers piercing the gray morning. To Mira, it felt less like an office than a throne room, the city below arranged as tribute. She stood by the glass, rain still sliding down from the night before, her reflection pale and hard. The Phoenix Drive burned in her pocket like a secret heartbeat. Ward entered without announcement. His presence filled the room, steady, controlled, as though gravity itself leaned toward him. He didn't ask if she had met with Thorn. He already knew. You understand now, he said, crossing to the bar. He poured whiskey through the clock read 10 in the morning. Why they sent Vale. Why they'll keep coming. Mira didn't move from the window. Thorn says you stole his work. That you killed his vision. Ward swirled the glass, watching the liquid more than her. He calls it vision. I call it chaos. His algorithm would destabilize global markets. He claims it would free people. It would bankrupt nations. And while he preached salvation, he made sure he owned the only ladder out of the fire. His words were smooth, practiced. Mira felt their weight, but not their certainty. "You kept it for yourself," she said. Ward set the glass down untouched. His eyes locked on hers, pale and unyielding. "I contained it. If you want to call that theft, fine. But I kept the world from collapsing. That's what matters." Silence pressed between them. Mira's hand brushed against the locket under her blouse. Discipline. Her brother's face flickered in memory. Ward stepped closer. "You've seen what I built. A single company that can turn governments with a word. You saw Vale fall apart when you refused to be invisible. That is the world, Mira. Those who shape it, and those who are shaped by it." She turned from the window, meeting his gaze. "And you want me to shape it for you?" His mouth curved, not a smile, something sharper. "I want you to shape it with me." He moved to a digital screen on the far wall. With a swipe, he revealed dossiers, faces, names, notes of men and women scattered across industries and governments. Enemies I can't fight in boardrooms, rivals who move in shadows, who don't answer to law. I need someone who sees before others act, someone who can strike before threats have names. The dossiers glowed in the dim light. Mira stared at them, each a life, each a target. "You want me to build a department?" she said. "A shield," Ward replied, "but sharper. Not reaction, but preemption. I'll fund it. You'll lead it. No chain of command but me. A throne of your own." Mira's chest tightened. She had spent years hiding, folding herself into the background. Now Ward offered her not just power, but visibility beyond measure. A place where her silence would no longer protect her. Her fingers curled into fists. "I'm not your weapon." "You're not Thorne's either," Ward said calmly. "But you can't walk between us forever. They'll come for you, Mira. Both sides. The only way to survive is to build something neither can touch." She felt the truth in that. Already she had become myth. News anchors, headlines, strangers online dissecting her name. She couldn't vanish back into service, not after blood had been spilled in her hands. Ward reached into his jacket. For a breath, she tensed, but his hand emerged with nothing but a card. Black, unmarked, but for a single number. He set it on the desk. "When you're ready to begin, call. I'll clear the path." Mira stared at it. The number seemed to glow against the dark wood. She turned back to the window, the city sprawling beneath clouds. Her reflection in the glass no longer looked like a waitress. It looked like something she didn't yet have words for. Ward's voice softened. "You don't have to answer today. But know this. Thorne will try to reclaim you. He'll tell you stories of justice. He'll drape chains in the cloth of memory. And when he does, remember that you've already chosen once, when you stood in that restaurant and decided no one would bleed while you were still standing." Mira closed her eyes for a moment. She saw Vale's broken arm, heard the crack of bone, smelled cordite and fear. She remembered the couple clutching each other in terror. She had saved them, yes, but who had she saved them for? The locket pressed against her heart. The drive burned against her hip. 2 lives, 2 promises, colliding in her chest. She opened her eyes. "If I do this, Ward, if I build what you're asking, then I decide the lines we don't cross. Not you." For the first time, he smiled, genuine, thin but real. "Then it will be stronger." The words landed heavier than any order, agreement wrapped in respect, a contract unspoken but binding. A knock at the door broke the moment. An assistant entered, whispering about markets, investors, another meeting. Ward waved them away. But Mira saw it. The endless machinery of his empire, the weight of 1,000 moving parts demanding his control. She stepped back from the desk, her pulse steady now. "I'll think about it." Ward inclined his head. "Do more than think." She left the office with the card in her pocket, the drive in the other. The skyscraper's elevator dropped her toward the city's roar, her reflection in the mirrored walls a stranger she was only beginning to know. Outside, the sky was still iron gray. She pulled her coat tighter and walked fast into the crowd. People brushed past without seeing her, the way they always had. But she knew it was temporary. She was no longer invisible. And somewhere between Ward's tower and Thorne's shadow, the next move was waiting. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of controlled chaos. Headlines faded, but whispers lingered. Mira's name still traveled through newsrooms and backrooms alike. The waitress who broke a syndicate team with her bare hands. The city had turned her into myth. She hated it. She needed it. Ward's black card burned in her pocket for 3 days before she called. By the 4th, she was sitting in a room far below his tower, a floor not listed on the building's directories. The room was cold steel and glass, stripped of comfort. No paintings, no windows. Only a table bolted to the floor and 3 chairs. Ward waited with 2 strangers. One, a woman with severe posture and gray-streaked hair, introduced herself simply as Rain. The other, a man younger than Mira, but with the eyes of someone who had stopped believing in sleep, offered no name at all. Ward gestured. "This is your beginning." He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. Mira understood. The dossiers she had seen were no longer just digital ghosts. They were here, waiting to be shaped into targets, operations, strategy. Ward wanted her to command the pieces. Rain slid a folder toward her. Inside were surveillance photos of a man who smiled too easily, who wore wealth like a mask. Beneath the photos, notes of arms shipments, bribes, strings tied to a foreign minister. "A test," Ward said. "He isn't Thorne, but he serves the same hunger." Mira closed the folder. "You want me to eliminate him?" "No." Ward's voice was calm. "I want you to stop him. How you stop him is your choice. That is the difference between a weapon and a strategist." Mira looked at the nameless man. His gaze was flat, unreadable. A watcher, not a participant. She wondered how many times he had been the blade rather than the mind. That night, Mira walked the city for hours. Neon buzzed. Traffic screamed. Her reflection slid across shop windows and puddles. She saw herself holding the locket in one hand, the Phoenix Drive in the other. Past and present, warring. She chose action. By the end of the week, the smiling man from the dossier had been exposed, not through bullets, but through silence shattered. Mira had tipped a journalist in coded words, left a file where it would be found, pulled one string too many, and watched the man's empire unravel. His bribes surfaced. His allies scattered. Ward was pleased. "You understood the board," he told her. "Not every battle is fought with fists." But his pale eyes carried something else. Calculation. Ownership. Mira walked away from that meeting uneasy. She had proven herself useful. Too useful. The nights grew heavier. Sleep brought dreams she did not want. Her brother's face turning away, Sergeant Kalen's voice whispering discipline is survival. Thorne's kind eyes hardening into iron, Vale's scream when his arm broke under her grip. She woke with her pulse hammering, the drive clenched in her fist as if it could defend her. One evening, leaving Ward's tower, she felt eyes on her. Not the cold professionalism of Ward's watchers, but something closer. She turned a corner and caught a glimpse of a figure vanishing into the crowd, a shadow that moved like memory. Her phone buzzed an hour later, an unlisted number. "You're learning," the voice said. It was low, steady, familiar. Robert Thorne. But every lesson you take from him brings you further from the girl you once were. Mira stopped in the middle of the street. You're following me. I'm watching, Thorne corrected. Because you matter. Because I see the struggle in your eyes. Ward doesn't. To him, you're leverage dressed as loyalty. Her breath caught. For a moment she wanted to believe him. To believe the man who had once built her strength was still her protector. But then she remembered Vale's pistol raised at the diners in the Mariner's table. Remembered the fear in their eyes. That was Thorne's doing, too. You sent men to take him. You threatened innocence. And yet, Thorne said gently, you know I never would have harmed you. You are proof of what I built. Proof Ward cannot erase. She ended the call without answering, but his words clung like smoke. Days later, Ward summoned her to the tower again. His office smelled of leather and rain. He placed a file on the desk without preamble. Inside, photos of Thorne. Recent. Grainy surveillance, but clear enough to sting. He's reaching for you, Ward said. Don't doubt that. And if you let him, you'll end where he intends, in chains made of gratitude. Mira shut the folder. I won't be anyone's chain. Ward leaned forward. His eyes were sharper than knives. Then prove it. The pivot struck like thunder. She was no longer deciding if she would play his game. She was in it, whether she named it or not. That night, in her apartment, she sat in darkness with the drive on the table, the locket beside it. 2 anchors, pulling opposite ways. Outside, the city screamed as it always did. Inside, Mira felt the silence close around her, heavier than any gun. And in that silence, a knock sounded at her door. She froze. 3 slow raps. A pause. Then one more. The pattern was familiar. Too familiar. Her heart hammered as she reached for the pistol she had hidden under the counter. The door handle turned. The door creaked open before Mira could draw the pistol. Rain gusted in from the hallway, dampening the air with the smell of wet stone and iron. A shadow stepped inside. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Then the light from the street lamp caught his face. Not Thorne, not Ward. Vale. His arm was bound in a sling, his face a lattice of bruises, but his eyes were alive with fury. 2 men flanked him, different from the ones at the Mariner's table, younger, restless, eager. Mira leveled the pistol. You should be in a cell. Vale's laugh cracked like broken glass. Thorne wanted me free, and here I am. He took a slow step forward. You embarrassed me, shattered my name. I'll see how long your legend lasts when you're nothing but a corpse in your own kitchen. The 2 men spread wide, moving with the arrogance of soldiers who had never lost. Mira's pulse slowed. Her grip steadied. This wasn't fear. It was clarity. The moment when every breath, every calculation sharpened to a blade. The first man lunged. She sidestepped, slamming the base of the pistol into his temple. He dropped, gasping, his body sprawling against the wall. The second came fast, knife flashing. Mira caught his wrist, twisted until bone ground against tendon, then drove her knee into his chest. His breath whooshed out as he crashed to the floor. Vale watched, rage boiling beneath his bruises. He reached with his good arm for the weapon tucked into his belt. Mira fired. One shot into the plaster beside his head. The crack reverberated through the apartment. He froze. Don't test me, she said. Her voice was calm, colder than the rain outside. For the first time, Vale hesitated. His bravado cracked, fear flickering across his swollen features. He spat blood on her floor but lowered his hand. You think Ward will save you, he hissed. He'll bleed you dry until nothing is left. Thorne, he gave you everything, and you turned against him. Mira stepped closer, gun steady. Thorne gave me discipline, not loyalty, I don't owe either of you. Vale's sneer twisted into something darker. Then you'll die alone. Mira pressed the barrel under his chin. Not tonight. For a breathless moment, silence swallowed them both. Then Vale barked an order to his men, voice breaking with frustration. They staggered to their feet, one holding his ribs, the other bleeding from the temple. This isn't over, Vale spat. Thorn will have what's his. They retreated into the hall, footsteps echoing down the stairwell. Mira locked the door, her pistol still raised long after the sound had vanished. Her chest heaved. The apartment smelled of gunpowder and rain. She lowered the weapon slowly, her hand trembling at last. The Phoenix Drive glimmered on the table where she had left it, faint gold in the dim light. The locket lay beside it, chain coiled like a question. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She answered without words. Mira. Thorn's voice, steady as ever. I see Vale reached you. Her throat tightened. You sent him to kill me. No. I sent him to test you, and you proved me right. You're stronger than Ward will ever admit. A pause. The drive belongs with me. With us. Together we can end his empire. Her eyes burned. And if I say no? Then Ward will consume you. He'll make you his blade, and when you're dull, he'll discard you. That's what he does. You know it. She hung up. Almost instantly, the phone rang again. Another number. She answered. Ward's voice this time. They came for you. Not a question. A statement. You handled it. Good. Mira's silence stretched. Ward's tone sharpened. You see now, Thorn will never stop. But with me, you won't just survive. You'll command. Two voices, two truths, two chains. Mira set the phone down. Her reflection in the dark window stared back, fractured by streaks of rain. Not the waitress she once was. Not the girl who had bled in a gym under Kalen's fists. Someone else entirely. Her gaze shifted to the table. The locket. The drive. Past and future. Memory and weapon. Both heavy. Both hers. She closed her hand around them both, squeezing until her knuckles blanched. Outside, sirens wailed again, closer this time. The city was alive with wars fought in shadows, wars that now demanded her name. Inside, Mira stood in silence, every muscle tense, her choice still unspoken. The door she had just locked seemed louder in her mind than the voices of either man. Locked, but not safe. She exhaled, steady and slow. She had not chosen yet. But soon the world would demand her answer. And when it came, she would not be invisible.